This is the lecture on related services. My name is Dr. George Giuliani from Hofstra University, and this lecture will discuss the related services that we often see children with special needs receiving in special education. Now, under IDEA, a provision of a free appropriate public education requires related services as well as special education. And related services are specifically defined in IDEA. They are defined as transportation and such developmental, corrective, and other supportive services as may be required to assist a child with a disability to benefit from special education. And we'll go over that definition and what's involved with it coming out throughout this lecture. Now, related services must be provided to all eligible children in special education. A child who does not need special education is not eligible for related services under IDEA. And a child receiving special education may not be eligible for related services. So the point of this is that just because a child is in special education doesn't mean that he or she will be eligible for related services. But you can't get related services unless you're a child receiving special education. So a child has to be classified as a student with special needs, and then we determine whether or not that student meets the criteria for related services. Now, a school is not required to just give related services to every student. They're not required to provide related services necessary to maximize a child's potential. On the contrary, we give a child related services to ensure that a student can benefit from special education and the related services. So again, schools are required to ensure that a student can benefit from special education and the related services that he or she receives. You don't get related services to maximize your potential. Now, a school district does not have to provide a service to a student with a disability. The service is only considered a related service if it is necessary to help him obtain educational benefit from it. The related services has to be appropriate for a child. Now, the point of this is that when we talk about related services, we have to show that the service is going to have some kind of educational benefit to the child and that it's appropriate for a particular child. Now, schools can provide the services directly, or they can contract for their provisions from other agencies. So again, if the school doesn't have, say, a physical therapist on staff, they can hire through an agency for that particular service. But at all times, though, the school remains directly responsible for assuring that the services are provided. So if for some reason a school district doesn't have a speech-language pathologist in the building, it's still required to make sure that a student receives speech and language pathology. Okay. Now, when we talk about related services, IDEA includes a very long list of related services that schools must provide to students who need them to receive a meaningful education. And it's important to note that this list does not include all of the services which a school district may be required to provide. If a student requires a related service that is not on the list, it must still be provided by the school as long as the service is necessary for the student to be able to obtain educational benefit from special education. So the point of all of this is that IDEA is going to discuss a lot of different related services. But a student may need a different or a type of related services that isn't on the list. As long as you can show that that related service is appropriate for the child, the school is responsible for providing it. So the rest of this lecture is going to address some of the more common related services that we see throughout special education. And the first related service we're going to discuss is transportation. And transportation is specifically mentioned as a related service under the federal law. Transportation includes travel to and from school. And unless the child is on homebound or in some type of residential educational program, then it's logical that transportation from home to school and from school back to home is necessary for any child to receive educational benefit. And this makes a whole lot of sense. Obviously, we need to get children to school. We need to get them from school home. So unless the child is receiving some kind of homebound type of instruction or lives in a residential facility, then it's logical to expect that transportation from the child's home to school and from school back home is necessary for the child to get any kind of educational benefit from his or her program. Now, the issue of transportation is important because of the cost involved. In being responsible for transportation, school districts must also provide specialized equipment if it is needed. So a school district may be required to purchase special lift equipment for a bus or other special equipment such as a van to ensure that the student can get to and from school and to benefit from school once the student is there. So the bottom line is that if a child needs transportation in order to benefit from special education, the service must be made available. So think about this. If you have a child who's receiving special education and related services at the local high school, but that child is in a wheelchair, it is the responsibility of the school to make sure that the bus can either get that wheelchair onto it, or that the child receives specialized equipment within a particular van to get that child to school. Now, the question often comes up is, what's the role of the parent in all of this? Well, first, where the parent is providing transportation as a matter of preference, so where the parent says, I want to take my child to school, I want to drive my child to school. We have a van that is already equipped to take my child to various places. And the school district has made appropriate transportation services available. Then the school need not reimburse the parents. So if the parent is providing transportation as a matter of preference, and the school district says, no, we can provide appropriate transportation, but the parent says, no, that's okay, we're going to use our own transportation, then the school does not need to reimburse the parents. But the school district must reimburse the parents if the parents and the school agree to parent-provided transportation in lieu of school-provided transportation. So suppose the parents say, we have transportation services, but we need you to cover the cost of gas or cover the cost of various things for this transportation, and the school and the parents agree to it, then that is the responsibility of the school to reimburse the parents. But again, it is always the responsibility of the school first and foremost to make sure it provides transportation for a child with a disability. Now, generally, if a school district provides transportation to its general education population, then it has to provide transportation for its students with special needs. A school district can't discriminate against students with disabilities by not providing appropriate transportation services if they do provide transportation for those students without disabilities. So, if you're a school district and you provide transportation to all of your students, all of your general education students, then you have to provide transportation for special education students. A school district can't discriminate against students with disabilities by not providing appropriate transportation if they provide it to those students without disabilities. But the question often comes up is, what happens if a school district doesn't provide transportation to its students? Suppose you have a school district that doesn't provide busing or transportation to its general education students. Well, if a school district is not in the practice of providing transportation to the general education population, then it must decide on an individual basis, on a case-by-case basis, whether or not this particular special education student requires transportation as a related service in order to receive a free, appropriate public education. So when you have a school district that doesn't normally provide transportation to its general education students, then we look at the student with the disability on a case-by-case basis to determine whether or not the disability warrants transportation as a related services. This ends the first lecture on related services. You can now go to lecture number 2 on related services, beginning with speech and language pathology.